Hey everyone, this is Dr. Robinson. This video is going to accompany the chapter one reading and the PowerPoints that are included here from chapter one in the Rimley and Herlihy textbook. We're going to touch on this whenever we meet in person, but I wanted to add a little short video that just kind of goes over some important points and highlights a few things in this chapter. I like this book for a few reasons, but I think it's easy to read and I think that it is relevant. I'm going to do my best to make sure that I'm sort of including both school counseling and clinical mental health counseling examples and code of ethics and principles of ethical principles, etc. We'll talk about this a little bit, but school counseling fairly recently separated from ACA, making this a little bit complicated, but we'll talk about that after a while and when we meet in person. So there's two different codes of ethics. As you see, I uploaded both of them to Canvas. But anyway, let's jump into chapter one. Okay, so professional orientations. Your book starts off by talking about professional orientations. And as you know, CACREP is the accrediting body for the counseling program. So you're in a CACREP accredited counseling program. And what that means is we meet minimum or basic standards that are set for counseling programs that address, it's like the gold standard. So essentially, we apply for accreditation. The accrediting body comes through and checks off a variety of different, metaphorically, checks off a bunch of boxes indicating that we're meeting these minimum standards of teaching practices that align with ACA Code of Ethics, the ASCA Code of Ethics, best practices, and that we're really staying true to the principles, our counseling principles, and I'll talk about those in a little bit, but we are CACREP accredited, and that's really important for you to know. NBCC is going to be the agency that oversees your national counseling certification. So this is the one national entity that oversees our testing, and all states dictate their own professional license. That's in the Constitution. However, NBCC is the it's a national organization that oversees the testing that all states use to determine competence, a counselor's competence before awarding a license. Again, we'll talk about this a lot, but just know these letters at CACREP and NBCC. And then for our professional, there's three areas to the idea of, or the concept of a professional orientation. And the first area is professional identity. Who are we as a profession? What are our fundamental beliefs? What are our principles? And then there's ethics. Do we have a guiding code that helps to dictate ways of engaging in professional behavior and how to mitigate problems and etc. And then there's laws that are applicable to counseling. So we also have to follow, state and federal laws in many instances. And so these three components make up what professional orientation is. So let's really quickly, many of you have discussed morals, values, beliefs, ethics, laws, probably in your undergraduate program, but I'm going to jump into this real quick. We'll touch on it. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but morals are those guiding principles that are passed down to us by culture and society. So this is an expected way of behaving and interacting and engaging that our society and our culture dictates. Now, this can obviously vary depending upon culture and certainly depending upon societal changes and societal expectations. I would probably, it would be safe to say that there's some recognizable points in history where morals have changed and culture and society has sort of adopted a new way of thinking. And so that resulted in sort of different morals. And one could argue that right now we're going through somewhat of a culture and possibly even some moral shifts, some for the good and some for not so great, but that's another topic. Values are personal and then they can be professional. So when we have our values are also ways of engaging and interacting and behaving with other individuals and with society and people in society, but they're more personal. When we look at professional values, it's so counseling is what we do. So what are our counseling values? How does the counseling field tell us how to behave and engage, and what are the expectations of this? You see, I have this word bracket here. And so when we attempt to bracket a value, it's saying this is my personal belief, but it's not my client's. And so I need to bracket out my personal belief so I can attend to my client's needs. It is unethical for us, and you see this in here right off the bat on page 3. It's unethical for us to impose our values and our belief system on our clients. We are not there to be their moral teacher or or to have them sort of conform to our value system. Our value system has to be set aside, even though we do bring it into the room. It cannot be imposed on our clients. So we bracket that out. So that's an important word that you'll hear us use a lot in the field. And I wanted to make sure I touched on it. So ethics. So what are ethics? Ethics, there's a standard that's set specifically in counseling by a professional organization that dictates how we engage, how we how we conduct ourselves, how we make decisions, how we make sticky decisions. So when there's a problem, what do we do? And that's a better way of saying it. I think I didn't clearly start off talking about ethics, but it's how do we make better decisions? And is there a plan or a process or a protocol in place from a professional standpoint that tells us how to do this? You see right below that, I've got professional decision making and behavior. And we have ethical decision making models, and we'll talk about those a little bit in this chapter. But there's going to be an ACA code of ethics and an ASCA code of ethics. For those of you that are school counselors, you need to know both. Clinical mental health counselors need to be aware of what school counselors do, and you need to be aware of their ethics. But more so, school counselors, I'd argue, school counselors need to be able to engage in and abide by both sets of standards. So it's important for you to know that. Laws are more codified. This is do not do this or this will happen. Whereas ethics are, this is the way you should treat humans. This is the way we handle a problem when it comes across. We go through X, Y, and Z, etc. Laws are do not do this or else. It's put very clearly. They can be very general or they can be very specific, and of course they can be civil and criminal. And of course there are often times where we're engaging in situations that may or may not be ethical and or legal. So that sometimes there can be ethical and legal parameters to a dilemma. Here's just a little bit of a comparison. Laws you guys can read all these things, but it's just a little side-by-side comparison between laws and ethics. But the important part to this is that when we tie in this concept of best practice, and on chapter 4, you can see that this is in your book, the concept of best practice is discussed. But essentially it is, it's the best way of being the best counselor. It is how can you be the best counselor? And so that ties in laws, that ties in ethics, and that ties in really just not doing the bare minimum, but going above and beyond, exceeding the bare minimum, doing what is best and right for not only your client, but yourself and the counseling profession as a whole. And so all these pieces tie together. And that's really important. And essentially, we think that these pieces together make up professionalism. And I love this. It's this sentence at the very bottom of chapter 4. Professionalism demands that you be the best counselor for your clients that you are capable of being. We're going to talk a lot in this class about what can impede us from being the very best counselor. So I love that we start off talking about this, because we're going to talk a lot about those factors, those sort of very human factors that can get in the way of being our best counseling self as well. All right, let me make sure I'm going through here. So model for professional practice. Moving on to chapter 5, there's this great graph here on page 6 that talks about engaging in professional practice in the best way. And the first sort of layer, and you're going to hear in this field, you're going to hear the word intentionality being used often. And so what that means is, are you making these decisions purposefully? Are you engaging in an ethical dilemma or in a way with your client that is purposeful, intentional, and meaningful? Are you tapping into those principles and virtues that are important for you without imposing them on your clients? Have you gained appropriate and current knowledge? And are you seeking that out? Have you considered what this is like for you? Have you reflected upon it? Have you gained self-awareness? Are you making sure that you're not imposing or infringing upon your client? And then, of course, convictions. Do you have the ability to stand up for what's right, even though it may be difficult or complicated, but really doing what's right? You're going to be faced with a lot of ethical dilemmas. There's no right or wrong answer. And do you have the ability to do what's wrong, sort of regardless of the situation, and stand up for your client, stand up for yourself, and of course, stand up for the profession. Going forward, this next slide, you can see titled Principle of Ethics. The 6 items that are shown on this screen are the principles of the ACA Code of Ethics: autonomy, non-maleficence, I feel like I'm always saying that wrong, beneficence, justice, fidelity, and veracity. And so on page 10, your book does a very good job of talking about what these principles are, and we are going to revisit these principles over and over and over again. But essentially, are you allowing and fostering self-determination? Are you allowing for your client to make their own choices for their life, regardless of what you think? Are you doing no harm? Are you avoiding anything that may cause harm to your client? Are you promoting the good of society? Are you doing good in the world on behalf of counseling, on behalf of the field, and on behalf of the profession? Are you fair? So the concept of justice is, are you being fair? Are you treating everyone fairly? Is your decision making considering equality and fairness? Fidelity. Are you fulfilling the responsibilities of being a counselor? Are you showing up on time? Are you keeping appointments? And then finally, the last one, veracity. Are you being truthful? Are you being genuine and honest to clients and to others, and on behalf of yourself, on behalf of the profession, etc.? I'm not going to jump into this too much, really, but you can read, because I'm running out of time here. I like to keep these under 15 minutes. You can read about these on page 11. Ethical decision making. So you have your signature assignment is around an ethical decision making model and a dilemma that you have to sort of resolve. They're never easy. They involve a ton of careful consideration, and there are many ethical decision making models. Some have similar steps. Many of them have similar steps in common. They're non-linear, meaning there's not like do this and then do that and then do this. They can be happening sort of simultaneously. The steps can happen simultaneously and together. I'm going to stop right here, but I'm going to create another video just to go over this these next couple of slides.